Listen closely because the explainer we are diving into today is going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about the classic hero's journey. I'm your host, but for this one, I really need to speak to you as the traumatized ancient gardener. I'm the watchman who literally witnessed a philosophical nightmare unfold right in front of me. We're exploring a concept called the synthesis of the living dark, and I have to warn you right now, the truths hidden out there in the uncanny forest, they're absolutely terrifying. Right off the bat, you have to understand that this isn't some peaceful forest of growth. We are talking about a woods that festers. It's a place echoing with whispered, forgotten names hidden in this freezing fog. If you want to survive here, you can't just fight your way out. You are forced to make a truly harrowing choice. To even enter is to surrender to the collective dark, meaning you have to entirely abandon the safe, predictable world of the rising sun that we're all used to. So let's break this down into three parts, starting with Act 1, the fragile thesis. Our descent into internal madness really begins the second we step away from that predictable light. I actually walked into that freezing fog alongside the Wanderer, who was clutching this tiny, fragile lantern as tight as he could, against shadows that, I kid you not, looked like they had grown actual teeth. Now, you might be wondering about that lantern. Our source material vividly describes it as a splinter of lightning caged in iron, which is just brilliant symbolism. It represents the Wanderer's independent ego. If we're using Fichtean philosophy, this is the thesis. It's the super fragile assertion of human will. It's a torchbearer's internal certainty, that comforting little story we tell ourselves so we can feel like we're in charge and asserting our own terms upon the world. But out in the uncanny forest, human will means absolutely nothing. Which brings us right into Act 2, the conscious forest. We're stepping into an environment that is completely, violently hostile to that fragile little thesis. I want you to imagine a landscape where the trees are ribbed like human torsos, and there's this oppressive canopy above that literally strangles the sky. It's suffocating. The forest spirit we encountered out there reveals itself as the ultimate antithesis. It is an active consciousness, for sure, but one that is defined by absolute cosmic indifference. It is the non-ego rising up, demanding total submission from anyone foolish enough to walk into its swallowing gloom. Its one and only purpose is to flicker, bleed, and choke out whatever light you manage to carry in. To really wrap our heads around this dialectic struggle, let's use a simple analogy. Imagine a fragile little sandcastle built right on the shoreline. That sandcastle represents the ego's lantern, standing there totally helpless. Now imagine the unstoppable, crushing tide of the ocean coming in. That tide is the forest's cosmic indifference. It's not a fair fight. That sandcastle is absolutely going to get crushed. So observing this hopeless struggle from the depths of the liquid ash was a figure called the Shadow. And the Shadow learns a pretty terrifying lesson from another figure known as the Honest Guest, who speaks this stark, brutal clarity into the crushing dark. The guest reveals that the independent ego simply cannot survive this environment if it tries to stay separate. Holding on to that external fire, it's a fatal liability out here. And that realization pushes us right into Act 3, the grim synthesis, because protecting the light is just no longer an option. The environment absolutely refuses to be mastered. Normally, Fichte's idea of a synthesis implies some kind of neat resolution, like a step forward. But here, the synthesis is definitely no victory. Going back to our analogy, if the sandcastle is the thesis and the ocean tide is the antithesis, this grim synthesis is the muddy, ruined beach left behind after the tide completely obliterates the castle. It is a horrific, yet kind of darkly beautiful merging of the self and the terror. The Honest Guest lays out the necessary, visceral act required to actually achieve this, and it is a terrifying descent into internal madness. Step 1. The Wanderer has to deliberately break his own lantern. Step 2. He actually has to swallow the dying ember. And Step 3 is the horrifying payoff. His veins begin to glow like burning copper, and his eyes turn entirely to ash. Through this agonizing physical transformation of his very anatomy, the Wanderer merges with the terror. He doesn't just adapt to the environment. Actually, scratch that. He allows it to completely consume his independent ego. He leaves behind the stagnant piece of the outside world to become a literal vessel for the flame. He becomes the living dark that burns from within. This brings us to what I call the hero journey inverted. because this horrific transformation completely shatters all our standard expectations of a triumphant, heroic story.
Think about it. A traditional hero goes into the unknown, masters their environment, asserts their will, and returns to the high walls of the world with some great boon for society. But our wanderer? No. He is conquered by an environment that absolutely refused to be mastered. He doesn't go home. He disappears into the crushing dark as something entirely new.
As the ancient gardener, I just stood there bearing witness to this whole thing. And I was left not with a tale of triumph to bring back to you guys, but with absolute wonder and terror. I watched a man who carried his own fire deliberately let it consume him. The great dialectic of the predictable rising sun was just totally abandoned. The sovereign light was strangled out. It turns out the goal of this journey was never to conquer the nightmare. The goal was to become it.
So what's the takeaway? It all boils down to sovereignty through self-destruction. We are left to grapple with the darkest, most profound irony of this entire fable.
Truth is found through total self-destruction. That is a wild paradox, right? The terrifying realization is that true sovereignty in this world, the absolute only way to truly overcome that cosmic indifference, is to completely destroy the self. It becomes an internalized spark, a horrific unity that isolates the individual from the rest of humanity forever.
Ultimately, the wanderer transitioned from a man fighting the woods to the woods conquering a man. The journey doesn't end with a warm homecoming. It concludes with the creation of a vessel walking entirely alone in the festering darkness, forever changed. I want to leave you with one final haunting thought about this Fichtean nightmare, a question that's going to echo in that freezing fog for a long time. If true sovereignty requires the absolute death of the self, who is left to wear the crown?